John, welcome to the show, man.
Hey man, I'm super glad to be here because we're dressed the same. Dude, I know it's gonna be a good podcast when I show up and the host is dressed almost identically to me.
I love it. I mean, it was the first thing I noticed. I was like, this is a sign that this conversation is going to be life changing for so many people. But where I want to start, dude, is who is John today, and then we'll break down how you got there.
Yeah, so John, today I am the owner of the largest luxury real estate brokerage in Las Vegas. We have about 550 agents that work for us. We do about 2 billion in sales annually. We have the highest average sales price. We are a completely vertically integrated company where we own if anything that touches the real estate transaction we own. And we actually set those companies up, those verticals for other large brokerages here in Las Vegas and a couple across the country. So that's who I am now, but primarily that's the business side. I know that's the business card, which is kind of boring. Other than that, I like to think great father. I like to think great husband. I like to think fun dude to go to concerts with. That's who I would say I am. And occasionally terrible golfer. We'll go with that.
That's fair. What's the best concert you ever been to?
Dude, I'm so ruined now. I'm completely ruined. I am 53 years old. I've seen probably 1,000 concerts in my life, at least, right? It's just something I love to do. And we went and saw Oasis in the Rose Bowl, and I am completely ruined for literally the week after we saw Oasis. I went and saw the Struts, which is one of my favorite bands, and I saw them at a very small place with maybe like 800 people, which was very intimate, very small. And I was like, meh. Just meh. That's where I was.
Crazy. My first concert ever was Billy Joel, Elton John, like when they were still younger.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Billy Joel was standing on top of pianos when Elton John was singing The Bitch Is Back. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, that's an epic first concert. And it is always that, like, what's the one that'll top the next one? And I'm sure the Oasis one's incredible just because of the history, but I'm sure one day another one will top that one.
Well, cool thing for me, my first concert, this is a cyclical moment for me. My first concert, like not where your parents drag you, but the first one where like you go with your friends, potentially sneaking out and not telling your parents where you're going and go to a concert. But the very first one that I went like that was I saw Jane's Addiction open up for Love and Rockets in the Rights Union at the University of Florida when I was 15. And there was maybe 150 people at that concert. It was at the student union.
Unbelievable.
And recently, within the last year, I got to take my 17-year-old son to the Fountain Blue here and watch Love and Rockets open up for Jane's Addiction on the show two before they imploded in Boston and the band blew up. So that was my first concert. It wasn't his. I've been taking him to shows for a long time, but it was the first one he got to see. So nice cyclical moment for me.
Yeah, that's incredible, man. And like you said, right before they imploded. And so obviously you got it in before it all ended. And I'm sure they'll be back again as rock bands do so often. But yeah. I want to let's get into the real estate side a little bit. So what drew you to real estate? Obviously, you've created all this success. It didn't all start like that. Why real estate?
So I got fired by the 47th president of the United States on television when that happened. Yeah, everybody I was on this show with, so for those who are like, what the hell is he talking about? I was a contestant on the third season of The Apprentice. And for those younger ones that are listening, yes, the man with the orange hair in the White House used to have a television show where he would fire would-be hopefuls on TV. And I was one of those people. And when I was on that show, and I talk about it in the book, it's one of the first times I was ever around. I really changed my network. It's being around a bunch of people that were just killing it, like just operating at just a different level. And when I got off of the show, when the show was ending, I had taken a buyout from the tech firm I was the COO of. And Kendra Todd, who won my season, was like, hey, you can't sit on your boat and do nothing in Tampa. Let's go get a real estate license and come to real estate with me. It'll be fun. I mean, she lied, but yeah, that was almost 20 years ago. And that journey is kind of brought me to here.
Yeah, the Apprentice thing, there's another semi-connection thing there. So a long time ago, I started my first business with a business partner. We put together seminars and expos that focused on business and other things as well. But we put together this big business expo, and we hired Bill Rancic to be the keynote, who he won the first season.
Yeah, Bill's a great dude.
So with this being said, we sold 3 tickets to the event, had to cancel the event, never got to meet Bill. It was a crazy thing. It was the end of that business and that journey. But, The Apprentice is an interesting show because it's one I watched, probably early 20s and late teens, early 20s, and it's fascinating. I want to talk a little bit about that experience for you getting on a show. I think you made it to the eighth episode or something like that, which is
Right in the
about
middle.
half. Yeah, right halfway through the journey. What was that like? Was it real? Was the competition real? Did you actually take your business expertise into it, or was it more a personality game?
Yeah, I mean, yes, the people that were competing there were very smart, and it was very hectic and very fast. I was cooked from the day that I showed up. I knew there was no way I was going to win. Um, I'll tell you the story of why. I knew the first second. So the night before we start filming, we were watching the finale for season 2. In like we were already in New York, and you're in your little room, and we're watching this finale, and it was down to Kelly Purdue, who ended up winning, and then I don't remember her name. This nice woman that was competing with him. And I remember thinking to myself as I'm watching this, I'm like, dude, let him pick the woman, let him pick the woman, because there's no chance he's going to pick 3 dudes in a row. Like, this just not going to happen. And so he picked Kelly Purdue, and I was like, well, yeah, that was a fun run when it happened. And then the very next day, we're shooting all the ads, which was weird because he would shoot all of the production, like all of the ads and all of the marketing materials before the show started. Because if somebody went crazy and got kicked off or something, they're not going to call you back and have you do the marketing. So the very first time we ever saw Donald Trump, we walk into the suite and we're standing there, and they pose us all up. And I'm a big dude. I'm shrinking now, but at the time I was probably a little over 6'4". And there's a big X on the floor next to me, and I already know what the X is for, right? Because I'm in the back, and in walks Trump. How you doing, everybody? How you doing, everybody? Mr. Trump, here's your spot. He goes to the X, and the Kevin, who was the name of the photographer, goes up the ladder and takes 2 photographs. Click, click. Trump walks out of the photograph, says to Kevin, like, we're not even standing there. We might as well be furniture. And he goes, Kevin, 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 you got to move this guy. He's taller than me. And I was like, oh. So Kevin comes out. He's like, let's try something different. I don't know, you. And I'm like, oh, really? Me? Yeah. Okay, great. Let's pull you around front. And then they proceeded to take literally 1,000 photographs. And the funny thing about it was the picture they used for everything was one of the first 2. So that's the only piece of Apprentice memorabilia I have in my office, is that photograph from Yahoo, which clearly shows me taller than the 47th president. So.
Yeah, that speaks to ego. Now, keep in mind, this was a totally different person. He was perceived differently in the world, and but still, that ego comes into play, right? And he goes, "Well, I can't have this guy standing there. I'm only 5'8". I'm only 5'8".
It's your show.
Everybody cannot stand next to me. My stepson's 6'3". And he's 15, so he always stands on the other side of the family photos.
Yeah, for me, I got a giant head, so I can't be in the foreground of a photo. Like, I got to get in the back, because if you do like the V people, if I'm ever in the front, it's like, bro, who brought Fred Flintstone? Who is this guy? It's a disaster.
That's amazing. And so obviously that opportunity led you into this empire that you've built. So she says, "Hey, come along. It'll be fun." And you said, "Well, it wasn't." Let's talk a little bit about it wasn't.
No, I mean, look, I say that in jest. I mean, it's been a great ride. I love what I do, and it has been a good ride. And what I've always been gifted at, or one of the things that I will say I've always been very blessed with, is my ability to always be testing the next thing. And I've never gotten caught behind a trend in real estate. When I first started with her, this was back when the boom was going on, and we would do real estate shows where we would go to a real estate show in San Francisco, stand up on a stage, present, 6 projects across the country that were condo conversions, and then 200 people would walk in the back and buy condos that were occupied by people. And then I kind of saw that falling apart. And so I got into the short sale business in Vegas when I moved here, and got into the short sale business before anybody else knew what short sales were, started helping people with that. And then that led to me getting into the foreclosure business, where I was working directly for the banks, selling foreclosures. And then when I saw that dying out, that then led into working directly for the hedge funds. And I bought a huge portion of the portfolio in Vegas for Goldman Sachs and for Blackstone here in Vegas. And then from that, I moved into luxury. But always as I was going along, it was always like, I never did it by myself. It was always a team, right? So I always built a business around my business. And that little team of originally, I started with, 15, 20 people, just kept growing and kept growing to now it's a company of 500 and, 550 is where we like to try to keep it.
Wow. So talk a little bit about why luxury. And it's interesting. My wife and I started a company about 2 years ago in real estate, just rentals, right? Just getting started, trying to
Good
figure
for
it out.
you.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like we own a couple rentals now and we're ready to kind of start doing multi units and all that stuff. Talk to me about luxury and why that's the move.
Well, in sales, it costs as much. Just a stamp costs the same whether you send it to a house that's worth 150,000 or a house that's worth 6 million. If you're marketing, it costs the same to market. And then once you get a certain reputation in a market, which we do, I mean, we sell more homes over $1 million in Vegas than any other firm, and our firm here, Simply Vegas, is kind of synonymous with luxury. But I think once you get to that point, especially in a market like ours, not all markets are like this. You look at the migration we've had out of California, you look at all of the pro teams we've gotten here in the last 10 years, the luxury market here has exploded. I mean, we've got houses now trading 25, 27 million. Wow. And if you would have told me that was going to happen 10 years ago, I'd have told you were nuts. 10 years ago, a ultra luxe house was $5 million. And now that's not even close.
Yeah, regular home's a million. Right, like
yeah.
It's just unbelievable. And I'm in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, and the regular house is a million. And so it's one of those things you got to kind of obviously stay ahead of the trend. What do you think is next in real estate?
Well, for us, I think definitely here's the problem with real estate is I don't think we're going to have another national crisis like we had, which affects all markets the same way. Real estate's very localized, which makes it difficult because everybody now gets their news from Twitter and from headlines and from clickbait articles and all that stuff. And real estate's hyper localized, right? So what might be true for my market is completely different for another one. In Vegas, we're continuing to see prices push. I think we're going to continue to see that. Affordability is definitely an issue in the mid to lower ranges like it is in so many other markets, but we're not seeing that pullback that you're getting in Austin, Jacksonville, Tampa. We're not seeing that here. So even though sales have slowed and the numbers of transactions have cooled, you're still seeing prices climb. And that's the thing that's kind of befuddling people. I think what you're going to see nationwide, though, if I had to talk about a nationwide trend, rates yesterday were 2 days ago were 6.137, which I think was a low for the last 36 months.
Yeah.
When that number gets a consistent 5 in front of it, you're going to see all these people that have been sitting with their golden handcuffs, meaning they bought a house in 2000 and call it 18, 19, and they have a 3% interest rate, and they're like, well, I'd love to move, I'd love to get a bigger house because my family has grown, or I've gotten divorced, or my kids are gone. I'd love to change my living situation. But I got this 3% mortgage. I mean, I can't, for the same amount of money, I'm going to get so much less house. And I think those people will swallow a rate in the 5s. They're not going to swallow one in the 7s, but they'll swallow that change to the 5s. And when the rates hit 5.5, it's going to be an absolute avalanche. It's going to shoot prices up again.
Yeah, it's crazy because I had a conversation with our real estate guy, and he's like the 2s and the 3s and even the 4s may never happen again. Yeah. And so I think the realization of like in the 5s and all that fun stuff will absolutely kind of blow up the market again, and we'll kind of see where it goes from there. But I want to shift gears a little bit with you, and you have a podcast, you have a book coming out. I believe it's coming out next week from the release of this episode, Escaping the Drift. What does that mean to you?
All right. So essentially, it's a user's manual to my dipshit 27-year-old self, if I had to say what it is. Early in my 20s, I had a lot, like I said, I had a lot of cool jobs. I did a lot of cool stuff. Met a lot of cool people, but never built any wealth, never had any real direction. And so many times in my life was being designed by the whims of others. I was either employed by a major corporation that could tell me I had to move across the country on the drop of a hat. I was working for somebody else that when times got tough and they looked at the P&L, I was the highest paid employee and they could eliminate me. I had no control over what I was doing. And I think so many people now, something about COVID, man, and I go back to this a lot. I feel like there's this apathy that we've never quite recovered from since the end of COVID. And my best barometer for this, because I spent so much of my early life in the restaurant business, is the restaurant business. Being here in Vegas, like we have exceptional restaurants. I mean, we have every great restaurant in the world here. I'm sure very much like Western Pennsylvania, but we have every amazing restaurant here. And it used to be every time you went to a dinner that was hyper expensive, you'd be like, man, this was just exceptional. And now the level of service from the interaction, right, when you walk in to the how the food is, how the service is, all of it, great service, even in this mecca of incredible restaurants, now is the exception, not the standard. It really stands out when it happens. There's so many times you go to a place and you're like, I mean, it was okay, but I wouldn't go back again.
Yeah.
Just because the cost doesn't justify it. And I think that's not just restaurants. I think that's everywhere. I think everybody has this sense of malaise and apathy that they haven't quite recovered from. And you take that and you add to it that AI is taking so many jobs that are coming down the pipe. If you are somebody that is drifting along, I mean, if you feel like, every day is Groundhog Day and you're waiting for your boss to tell you if you have a job tomorrow, you've got to take control of your circumstances right now. And that's kind of what this book is it's a user's manual to my 27-year-old self who's living that life every day. And it's become my mission really to wake as many people up from that as I can.
You're 100% right. The world changed in how we interact with each other and how we interact even with ourselves during COVID. And there is no wake-up call. Like, this book is obviously being dropped at a perfect time because there needs to be a wake-up call if we're going to sustain the way Americans live specifically. Why is that such a calling to you? And also, why do you think it happened? Why do you think COVID caused that to happen, and why it's still happening?
I think because people it caused a sense of malaise that people didn't wake up from. I know it affected, like, I look at how it affected my kids, right? Their ability to connect with others and that disconnect. I think, like you said, it's that human connection. And I think people are just now like, man, if the man can do that to me, right? If the man, or whatever it is you want to call it, can tell me I have to stay in my house and wear a mask and shut my business down and take away my income, then what am I, in the back of people's heads are like, what am I doing? Right? And this is about taking control from that. Now, obviously, there's no chapter in there for how to fight back against the government if they do that. That's not part of this. But I think you can start to realize that you are culpable in everything that's happening to you. And I think that's one of the big mistakes people make. I have people interview for our company all the time that want to come work here, and we're very selective about who we hire. And the interviews always go one of two ways. It's either like, this is what I've, in doing a deep introspective myself, this is what I think I need to learn. This is what I think I need to be doing, or this is what my old company's not doing for me. This is why my current career situation is their fault. I don't hire those people because that pattern is going to repeat itself. And unless you can start taking complete responsibility for where you are in life, nothing else is going to change.
So how can we shift our mindset for the people that are in that malaise that you're talking about to get out of it? Because I think we're having this conversation, and I think a lot of people aren't self-aware enough to even realize they're in that place. What can we do to start waking people up?
Well, the first step in all of this is radical honesty. You've got to take a look in the mirror. And I have an exercise in here. It's one of the first things you do in the book, where you've got to literally look at yourself, and warts and all, you got to write it down. You got to write down everything about yourself that's an asset, everything about yourself that's holding you back. Now, this exercise has got to be done delicately, because what you don't want to do is craft a story that is permanent. What I mean is, like, if you say, I'm lazy, I procrastinate, I do this, you've got to tell that to yourself and be honest in a way that, yes, this is what you are, but it's not just how you are. Like, I hate when people say like things like, oh yeah, I'm always late because it's just how I am. No. That's how you're choosing to be. So when you're laying this out with radical honesty, once you kind of figure out where you really are in life, and nobody put you there but you, right? Then you can start to plot a path forward, because this is all about taking a journey. It's all about getting to where you want to go. It's all about clarifying your goals and then creating a plan that's going to get you to where you are, and then how to have the resilience to make sure that you follow through. That's what this is about. But it all starts with that radical honesty in yourself. And a lot of people, through that process, if you find yourself saying, I'm this way, and then because, I don't care about the because. The because doesn't matter. None of that matters. I'll tell you a story to emphasize my point. When you write a book, like, one of the things that happened was I got a review from this place called Publishers Weekly, which is like they review books for book buyers. Who cares? So I get it from my publisher. Oh, we got a review. Okay. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Let's see this review. And I opened the review, and let's just say it was less than complimentary. And I was like bummed about it. And I was like, oh my God, that's terrible, right? What a terrible, bum thing. And I went to bed bummed about it. And I woke up the next morning and I read it again, and I was absolutely thrilled with it. And I'll tell you why. Because A, this is a human being that read the book, right? So it's subjective on their opinion, and that's fine. but they said this line, and I'm going to try to remember verbatim in their review. They said that my advice can come off trite because I refuse to acknowledge the myriad systemic issues and I present all problems as solvable. And I was like, yeah, you bet your ass I do. Absolutely I do. Because, dude, if you want to walk through life thinking the boogeyman is holding you down, this book is not for you, right? You're never going to agree with anything I say. And why do I believe that? Because much like you with the podcast, how many stories of just incredible success have you had sit on this podcast with you and you're like thinking to yourself, this person has no business being anywhere near the success based on cultural background and massive poverty, incredible setbacks, like the world's stacked against them. And yet here we are having this conversation about incredible success because they refuse to buy into the fact that there's not a myriad of systematic problems holding you back. All problems are solvable.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think, I've been doing this podcast for 9.5 years. I've talked to everybody that you could possibly think of and then beyond. And it's because I get to have these conversations that I can't allow excuses to happen. A dear friend of mine, Nick Santanastasso, born with no legs and one arm, right? So you go, okay, if he's able to go build not one, not two, but 3 9-figure businesses, right? If he's able to go out and build all this massive wealth and the success and be successful physically and all these things, like who am I? I've got 2 legs and 2 arms, right? And I think when you look at it from that standpoint, it's so true. You can't write that story and all things are solvable. I think that's an entrepreneurial mindset. So, as you talk to these people who come into your company or people who are, an employee, how do you teach them that mindset? Because I think it's ingrained a little bit. And then, I sat on 500, almost 600 episodes and had these conversations and it's allowed me to rewire my brain.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, and here's why. You just answered it. So first of all, about Nick, the guy with like half a body wanted to enter a bodybuilding competition. Dude, that dude is unbelievable, right? Yeah. It's unbelievable because he just, he's not going to let anybody put limitations on what he can do. Now, some of that's innate, right? You get in a bad situation or you start behind the 8 ball like that. Some of that's got to be innate with you, right? With Nick, he just was like, I'm not doing this. It's innate in him. He accepted the challenge and moved through it. But like with me, like what you just said, the reason that you've grown that callus or you've done that is because you've chosen to put yourself around people that succeed at a high level. And it changed your perception of what's possible. If every Friday night you're going down to the neighborhood bar and hanging out with your buddies that you went to high school with, and you're in your mid-20s and all you're doing is talking about that hilarious time that you pulled the prank on Mr. Wilson in 5th period, yeah, no shit, you're not being successful. You've got to, I'm sorry, but you've got to change your environment. You got to change the people you're around if you're ever going to see the world differently. One of my favorite quotes that kind of goes along with this is, I've never seen a well-traveled racist. And it's the same thing with entrepreneurship, right? It's like if you're around a bunch of people that are getting it, like, I don't know how many times I've been in a room, and this is not from ego, but you're like, here's somebody just doing something incredibly well. And you're like, bro, I'm smarter than this person. Like, what am I doing? Like, I got to go. One of my toxic traits is if I hear a business, I'm like, I could do that. And then I go down the rabbit hole and I'm like, stop. But if you don't think that way, if you don't think about what's impossible, my first step is look at who you're surrounding yourself with. Look at the stories that you're being told, right? Listen to what's going into your head. What echo chamber have you decided to step into? Have you decided to step into one that's replicating success or one that's replicating failure? Because I promise you, if you start liking a bunch of posts about how crappy the world is, I know those algorithms are serving it to you. And if those algorithms are serving it to you, chances are you're serving it yourself.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that. I actually started to host my own live event based on my podcast because I went to an event and I went, I could do it better than this person. I could do this. Yeah. And then down that rabbit hole I went, and here we are. We've done a number of live events and virtual events and all that stuff. But it's so true. And it's funny that you brought up the people you surround yourself with, because you had mentioned earlier after The Apprentice how it was the first time you were in rooms with people with like massive success, people doing crazy big things, and it opened your eyes to that. What do you do now as the guy who's built the massive success to make sure you're still in those rooms that are leveling you up?
Dude, I'm always like, I love mastermind groups. I love them. Probably my favorite one is Boardroom Mastermind with Kent Clothier. I love, it's a real estate based one with very high net worth real estate people that I love, that I'm constantly inspired. I did take some time off from that right now because of my toxic trait, where I'll go to one of those meetings and then come home and throw up all over my people about the 9 different businesses we're going to start, because I saw somebody talk about it and I figured I could figure it out. So I told Ken, I was like, look, until this book comes out, it's all book for me. That's all I'm doing. But you've got to seek out those rooms. And yes, not everybody necessarily has the means to go drop 6 figures a year on mastermind groups. I understand that. But the internet is such a wonderful place if you use it properly. You know, there are meetup groups for everything. You can get meetups for anything. The one I talk about all the time is my friend Pace Morby. Dude, what he has done with that sub 2 community, like the lives that they have changed through, wealth and real estate with having no money down buying property, is amazing. And he doesn't charge for those meetups. And whether he's there or not, there are sub 2 meetups all over the place. You can find meetups with people that are getting it done in something that you're interested in. If you want to learn how to flip cars or whatever it is, you can find a meetup on Facebook that does that and start doing that. But the problem is, most people want to wait around to be invited to something. Mm-hmm. They don't want to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm over here. Can I get involved with what you're doing? And so literally, it's like, I always talk about my favorite Christmas movie, Die Hard, which it is a Christmas movie. It's the best one ever made. But the best line from that movie is when the terrorist is like telling him to come out because no one's coming to save you. And if you take one piece of advice from any guru, from any book, from anything, I think that's the one you need to take to heart. No one is coming to save you. You've got to save yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's ego, right? People are afraid to say, hey, I need help, or hey, I'm not where I want to be, and all those things. And I tell people all the time, look, if you can't get in rooms because of where you are financially, start a podcast. You can start to have these conversations all day long, build those relationships, and see where that goes, right? And I often think about how, I always wanted to set the table in some way, shape, or form. What does that look like? I didn't know at the time, but I was like, let me start with a podcast. And then I set a table where incredible people come together at my events. And then now I'm invited to other tables that I never thought I'd be a part of. But it was all that whole like, okay, I'm too stupid to know anything. Let me start a podcast because I thought I could be good at it 9.5 years ago. By the way, 9.5 years ago, I sucked at it. It was terrible. It was like, I always tell people all the time, I go, if you can find those old episodes, because they are still out there, like go listen. It was really, really bad. But the reality is you have to start somewhere and you have to get uncomfortable. People are so afraid of getting uncomfortable, though.
Yeah. See, here's what you got to do. You got to delete just the very first episode. Like the very first episode of my show is deleted and it's nowhere, just because I want it to be like the lost ark. And I want people like quest for it, because it was so incredibly terrible. I mean, Mike's popping, Mike's dropping, I'm switching myself like this as we're talking. I mean, it was a complete disaster what we did. So yeah, the lost episode is out there. But guys, I'm sorry, what was the question? I forget what you said.
No, I was just stating, like, people are so afraid of getting uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, that's where growth happens, man. It's where it happens. And what I have found are, I'll give you an example. One of my great dude, unbelievable dude. This dude, Leon Howard. I don't know if you know who that is. He goes by the Wall Street Trapper, lives in Atlanta. Yeah. Trap has a massive following, right? And he came in to Boardroom Mastermind because he was paying, unbeknownst to any of us, like we didn't know who he was. And he's like, just comes in so gracious and walked those rooms and listened and asked questions and was just an absolute student. And, you're just like, okay, cool. And everybody there's very giving and trying to help and this and that. Reality of it is Trap could financially put half the dudes in their lights out. Right? If he wanted to put their lights out, actually he could. The dude shows up and I'm like in a conversation. He's like, yeah, I paid several $1 million in taxes last year. I got to figure this out. And I was like, wait, what? Huh? How's this work? And he starts going through what he's doing. And his mission was so grateful. But here's a dude that has achieved a level of success that most people would dream of. It would be the finish line for so many people. And for him, he's walking as a student. He's walking with grace. He's walking with humility. I understand. I'm not going to flex what I know how to do because that's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to learn. And I think that's something that all of us struggle with from time to time. And when I see that in people, it's such an admirable quality. I think it's amazing. I'm not perfect. I struggle with that a lot. I struggle with like, well, why is this dude on stage? Why am I not on stage? I'm a better speaker than this guy, right?
Yeah.
And then you got to like, wait a second, stop, calm down. Let's get what we, let's back this up a little bit because ego, as my friend Kevin says, is not your amigo.
Yeah, it's so true. And when I think about escaping the drift, when you start to create success in your life, or you've created success, sometimes it is easy to coast, right? I've kind of built my life now where I work like 15 hours a week. I'm making more money than I've ever made before. And I had a conversation with a buddy who does some things similar to me as far as running communities and all that stuff. And he looked at me and he goes, "What do you do when you get bored?" And it was such a powerful question because I was like, "Oh shit, I didn't even realize I was bored." Right? Like, because you're just you end up coasting or drifting, right? So, like, how do you speak to those people who've created so much success they don't have to be pedal to the metal all the time, and they start to tend to drift?
Well, I remind people the only way to coast is downhill. The only way to coast. You got to keep pedaling or you're going to fall apart. But that's, again, part of the book is about really establishing what your vision is for where you're trying to go and having that North Star. One of the reasons I called Escaping the Drift, and I love Erma McManus called this out on my podcast. One of the reasons he loved the title so much was he goes, the problem with drifting is you're moving. Like you still feel movement, but you're just not paying attention to where you're moving to. And having that governing North Star of understanding like, okay, this is the vision of where I want my life to go, who I want my life to be. And if you don't have that star to kind of navigate by, you won't realize when you're drifting off. So what I find is a lot of people that are in that situation where they've gotten success and they are where they want to be, you just have to ask them a simple question, which is, I know who you are right now, but who do you want to be? And normally with people with a high level of success, that kind of gets the juices flowing because as you go through different seasons of your life, in some seasons, it's all about accumulation. It's about becoming that person. And then you hit the place where you're like, man, I really want to start giving some of this back. I really want to start helping that next generation because I can tell you, as much as I have strived forward in business, right? As much as I've done that, I take so much more joy from reaching back to pull others forward with me. And I tell people all the time, somebody asked me on a podcast recently, they said, you became a speaker or you became a speaker is what they said. And I said, no, I've always been a speaker, just the rooms got bigger. Because I've been standing in front of sales teams for 25 years. I mean, I've been doing that, just the floor gets bigger. And I think you make these shifts through your life where you start to see that you get more of an accomplishment through the accomplishments of those you're developing. And so if you're bored, I would say, reestablish who you want to be. And you're probably at a place where it would feel pretty good to start bringing somebody else along.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a question. I ask every single person on the show. It's a 2-part question.
Love it.
First part is, what is your definition of success? The second part is, what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
My definition of success is the ability to do whatever I want, whenever I want it. Everything in my life is by choice. It's not by requirement. That is my definition of, I have completely escaped the drift. My time is, every decision I make is 100% based on what I want to do. And I love everything that I'm doing. That is success. It is not, money does afford a lot of that, but it's not about things because it's about time. And when you're younger, right? When you're a young man, you think you're going to live forever. And then when you hit a certain age, you start noticing it like, oh man, in your Facebook group from high school, like, oh dude, yeah, that dude died. Man, yeah, he didn't look too good. There's no candlelight vigil anymore, right? It's just like, yeah, the dude ate fried chicken every day for 20 years and he died of a heart attack. Yeah, shocker, right? And you start to realize that time is finite and how you spend that time is so important. And so having that ability to do that is clutch. How I remind myself of that or how I keep on the path, I remember myself of that every day. I wear around my neck. Memento Mori is what my dog tag says on the front. And on the back of it, it has the initials of every one of somebody that I would consider, in that top 3 close friends that have passed away. And as we talked about before this started, unfortunately, I had to add some more initials to this not too long ago. So every time I don't want to do something or I get to do something, I always just kind of grab this like my little reminder talisman, how lucky I am to still be here to do these things. Because any of these guys would kind of give anything to probably do the same.
Yeah, man. I just, back in August, I turned 41. And I remember when I was coming up to my 40th birthday, I didn't think it would affect me as much as it did, but it really did. It was this realization of, like you said, people were passing away, whether it be ironic things or heart attacks or whatever that were close to my age. And then I quickly went, oh, based on averages, I'm more than halfway done.
Mhm.
Like, this life is more than halfway done. And now, do I hope to live to 100? Sure. But nothing's guaranteed, as we know, right? With the people that we've both lost in our lives. And, I look at that from a standpoint of, like, okay, now it's living with intention. Like you said, totally escaping the drift, which you talk about in your book, and building the life that you want and spending your time where you want to spend it. And I've been so focused on that. It's been absolutely game changing for me. There isn't a day where I wake up and go, I don't want to do this day.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just unbelievable. And so, like, the message that you're sharing in this book is absolutely incredible. What's the biggest takeaway people are going to get when they go through the book?
Well, so this is not just fluff, right? At the end of this book, if you'll do the work that's in it, and I give you get not just this book, but there's a QR code you can scan where you can download like a 140-page workbook that goes with this. I want it to be tactical. I want you, when you're done with this book, to say, okay, dude, now I understand where I am. I understand where I want to go. I actually have a plan with actionable steps to get me there. And I understand how to have the resilience to make it happen. That's my goal for people, is they leave this with an actual plan to get them where they're trying to go.
Now, I don't know if you touch on this in the book, but we talked earlier about having that North Star, or that purpose, or that thing driving you forward. What do you say to people who go, I don't really have that. I just feel like I'm drifting, or I'm floating through life.
Yeah.
I don't know even how to find my North Star. How do they find it?
Well, it's simple. It changes pretty quick, right? So the best thing to do is say, okay, let's assume that everything went the way that you wanted it to go. Like, you got the job that was paying you, you got the job that was paying you the way you wanted a job. You found your spouse, you did all of these things. Let's say everything was going the way you wanted it to go. Describe to me your life in as many details as you can. Describe your life to me a year from now, if all of that was true. Not that you're becoming, not that you're doing this, not that you're getting this stuff. Describe your life to me. And I mean, down to, if it's, I want my kid to go to college and not have any debt. Okay, cool. What does that look like? If it's, I want to buy a new house in a better neighborhood. I want to buy my first investment property. I want to get out of credit card debt. Whatever it is. Describe to me what your life is like if all that's become true. And then when people can start to actually visualize themselves into the future and start to see that stuff, well, now that North Star becomes a little clearer, because everything has to start with why. If you don't understand why you're doing anything, you're not going to get there. You've got to establish the why you're trying to get there. And it doesn't matter if it's not designed to impress me or your friends. It's got to matter to you. Some of the people that I coach, I've heard some whys where I'm like, okay, like that's, hey, if it doesn't for, I'm not saying that, of course, but I'm thinking to myself, if that does it for you, great. And you can see how something that is completely irrelevant to me is massive to them. And I'm sure some of my stuff, they would look at me like, well, I don't understand what that means to him, but great, because it's only for you. It's not designed to impress anybody. So establishing that why by having that vision and being able to really see yourself in a place in the future is great. And I'll give you another, regardless of whether you buy the book or not, I'll give you a great little cheat code, which is, we've all talked about vision boards. Everybody's talked about vision boards over the years. And remember, they used to have those parties where, like, you would cut pictures of jets out and put them on the wall. And it was nonsense, right? ChatGPT, once you get that vision, ChatGPT can create you a photorealistic image of that future that you can look at every day. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to go into the law of attraction, all that stuff, but I do believe that that's real. I believe that if you see something that you desire heavily every day, you will take action towards it. And in my gym, in my bathroom, I've got my vision board stuff. And it seems like everything that I put up there tends to come true, because I look at it every day and I think, okay, how can I take action to make that come true? And it looks real. And it's so funny. One of them is a picture of my book with like a bestseller sticker on it at like Hudson News in the airport. And the COO of my title company one day was like, oh, dude, so how's the book going? It's been out for a while now, right? And I go, no, it comes out in November. And he was like, well, wait, it says it's a bestseller. And I go, dude, that's ChatGPT made that. That's not real. It's not a real picture. I go, I just look at it because I'm going to make that happen one way or another. We're going to make that reality. So yes, I think you've got to figure out what you want your life to look like, and then you can reverse engineer from there.
Yeah, dude, I love it. I'm a big believer in the visualization process. I have a daily visualization practice that I do, and touch all the senses and get me there because it does make it easier to take the action needed to have whatever that is, right? You don't always want to hop on 10,000 podcasts to sell a book. You don't always want to do all this stuff. But the reality is, it makes it a lot easier when that vision is clear right in front of you. And so I love how you place that. So let me ask you this as we fast forward into life, hopefully 60 years from now, you're laying on your final resting bed. And I want you to imagine that everything you've created is gone. So the book doesn't exist, the podcast doesn't exist, none of that exists. And you could only be remembered for one sentence. What would you want that sentence to be?
Great father. 2 words, period.
I love it,
That's
man.
it. Great father. My kids are amazing, amazing humans. Their mother has done such an exceptional job, my wife, of making sure that they are exceptional humans. I'm taking as much credit as I can, but luckily for us, we made a decision very early on. When the kids were little, when you were little, right? Did you always were you always in West Pennsylvania? Were you always there?
No, I grew up in South Jersey, but similar.
All right, so you grew up in South Jersey.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So you'll get this concept then. Like me, I was a kid of the 80s, right? So both parents were working. My parents got divorced when I was very young. And so, you got home from school, nobody was there, right? And that's how so many of our friends grew up. And there was always that one kid's house, right? Where the mom was home and she was the peanut butter and jelly mom. Like that's where you would go to play wiffle ball or play football. And then she made sure everybody had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and that was it, right? So really early on when my kids were young, we really wanted to, my wife was like, I think I want to be the peanut butter and jelly mom. I'm like, great. And so that has been a big driver for me is to make sure that our income stays way enough that she's had the luxury to do that, which I think scientifically, if you look at it, there's been studies that, growing up in that type of environment is a massive advantage for kids going forward. And my kids are definitely a reflection of that. But yeah, that's it, dude. For me, none of this matters, right? It's all fleeting. And one of the principles that I teach in my book, which is funny, I talk about don't tie your ego to what you do so many times, because especially if you're in a position where what you do can be pulled out from underneath you. I tell a story in the book about many moons ago. I was the general manager for a place called Cobalt Lounge in Atlanta, which Esquire magazine had named the #1 nightclub in the United States. We were thumping busy, amazingly busy. It was great. I rolled all over town. And there's no place I couldn't get into. We were the hottest spot. I was the guy running it. I had total control of it. I was the man in Atlanta. And then Super Bowl 2000 happened where Ray Lewis, the football player, came in and had a little bit of an issue with somebody he didn't do it, but some people he was with anyway, there was a murder, which, I got to be on SportsCenter for all the wrong reasons. But yeah, you talk about nuking a business, that nuked that business. And that went out of business. And very quickly, my whole identity was tied to that job. And when that fell apart, and all of a sudden it was like, I'll never forget, I walked up to this new bar opening in Midtown called Lava Lounge. And this was probably 7 months after the club had closed. And I go walking up and randomly there was a door guy there that I didn't know. And I was like, the line's around the planet. And I go walking right to the front as I had so many times. I'm like, hey man, it's cool. I'm John from Cobalt. And the guy just looks at me and goes, bro, that bar went out of business like a year ago. And it as stupid as that is, right? As stupid as that sounds, that crushed my ego.
Yeah.
So many people connect what they do, what they have, things to their own personal self-worth. And you can't do that. You've got to attach, your ego has got to be solely based in who you are as a person, because that can't be taken away from you.
Yeah. You see it a lot with like professional athletes. When the career's over, or if the career never becomes what they thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Happens all the time. And it's so true to look a little bit deeper into who you are versus what you do or what you have. I love that take, man. I love it. So I wrap up every single interview with the same question, but before we get there, what's the important stuff? How can people find you? How can people order the book? Let's get this thing in the bestseller. Let's make this vision come true.
Yeah, I'm at the John Gafford everywhere. So thejohngafford.com, the John Gafford on Instagram. You can order the book if you want to go right to my website and get it, The John Gafford. There's some extras you'll get, or you can order it Amazon, anywhere books are sold, Barnes and Noble, all of that stuff. It's available everywhere online. You can also get the audiobook, which massive respect to audiobook readers, because it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do was read that book. You don't realize how quickly you talk until you record an audiobook and get told over and over you talk too fast. But yeah, that's where you can find it. But yeah, listen, again, as far as the book goes, if every day feels like Groundhog Day, if you feel like you just don't have any direction, if you are terrified your boss is going to come in one day and tell you you don't have a job anymore because the robots are now doing it, this book's for you. And hopefully the information inside of it, it's stories of my life and things that I've learned that I would love to get in a time machine, go back and hand this to my 27-year-old self.
Yeah, man, I love it. So like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question. Since the show is called The Growth Now Movement, that question is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
My biggest moment of growth was when I got in that room on The Apprentice, not because it was on television, not because exposure, but being around the right people and realizing that I was woefully underperforming to my own potential.
I love it. John, thank you so much, man, for coming on and sharing your wisdom with my audience. I've loved this conversation. If we ever meet up in person, we got to make sure we're both wearing the same jacket, man.
Yes.
Dude, I appreciate you. This was great.
Nope. Glad to be here, man. Thanks for having me.